in that paper. But let's just begin with you, Professor Collins Odote, and looking at what we have here on the table. First of all, universities have been complaining they are cash strapped. And they have properties. We can not only just Kenyatta University, we can talk of University of Nairobi with various campuses as well, looking at Kabete. And the manner that this has been handled, first of all, from the government perspective, do you think it has been handled in the wisest of fashion? And the reaction from the university itself, do they also respond in the wisest of fashion in terms of really clinging and not really releasing this particular parcel of land in question that we have here?
Dibal, several things. First, the 2010 Constitution addressed the issue in question, I think, fairly elaborately. If you look at the 2010 Constitution, it says that there are three categories of land, that's public land, community land, and private land. So the first thing to debunk is, under the 2010 Constitution, we do not have anything called government land. Mm-hmm. So when someone say, anybody who makes the point that this is government land, I think misses a little bit the conversations around.
So the prof is off the mark.
I think, strictly speaking, legally, government does not own land. Land is vested in the public, and I think that's and for good reason. But the second point is that all land in this country is for the people of Kenya. Meaning that when the people of Kenya requires land for a particular purpose, there are mechanisms by which they can get it. So if even my private land, when it is required for public purpose, it can be taken. So that should not be something to be debated if it's required. I think what is critical is what is the procedure for taking that public land. Mm-hmm. And I think we may not know the full details, but I think there are certain things that could have been done better and could have done with in accordance to the law. The Law Society has said that they'll be going to court, and I think there's going to be a huge conversation. One of the huge conversations is going to be what's the role and the place of the National Land Commission. I think that's going to be a huge conversation, because the National Land Commission, in instances when you're talking about acquisition of land for public purposes, the National Land Commission requires to be involved, because they are the ones who are vested in terms of management of public land and dealing with it on behalf of the public. So I don't see the National Land Commission. But there's a second thing, that you asked me. Chapter 6 that we're talking about talks about bringing honor and dignity to the office.
Yes.
I think the spat between the president and the presidency and the university, I think is extremely unfortunate. It is unfortunate when you have the VC and the president almost having, so to speak, public dressings when the president goes, and there could have been a neater way of dealing with this thing, in my view. I think having the president go at the time is launching and then giving the tirade to the VC, I think as a public officer, it makes life difficult for that public officer. The second, I think now having the letters being strewn all over, the VC coming to address and sharing the letters all over, I think again, that's for me in terms of relationship with the presidency, that's also unfortunate, because then now, as opposed to focusing on the legal issues, we now focus on the power play, and I think focusing on the power play, we put ourselves in terms of for the VC, by the time that those statements came out, you are damned if you do, in terms of if you give out the land and procedurally, you are damned if you don't. If you don't give out the land, then your goose is cooked. So that for me, I think is something that's I think the other thing, that I think is going to be at the heart of the conversation.
Excuse me.
If you look at the debate was that land was being required for WHO, and I think we were discussing with colleagues of mine with which we teach land law, that when you want to acquire private land for public purposes, the process of public compulsory acquisition is fairly laid out in the Constitution. The question is, if you want to move land from one public purpose to the other, what's the procedure by which that is done? I think that's going to be a huge conversation in terms of what's the procedure of moving it, because it's assumed it is for public purpose. So how do you move it from one to the other? How do you determine whether what KU wanted to use the land for is more important than what it is that they wanted to do for who? But the last one for me, the one that I think is critical, is the public conversation was the land was required for putting in place a facility for the World Health Organization. But if you look at the letter that I've seen, the letter mentions 4 purposes. The letter mentions WHO, the letter mentions some research facility, but it also mentions two other things. It mentions that this land was, quite a bit of it, was going to KU Teaching and Referral Facility. And that's where the heading of the star comes in. The tiff between KU Teaching and Referral Facility and KU in the one instance. You know that the former VC who was instrumental in the creation of the facility is now the chair of the referral hospital, Professor Mugenda. Olive. Yet on the other hand, the VC who is now there have been contesting in terms of how that board is managed. In the one instance, they used to be part of the board, now they aren't. Two, they have been contesting the relationship. So that's clouding the conversation, especially if you look at how the land is going. The last one is part of the land is also going to squatters. So it's actually going to private. So there's almost conversion from public to private purposes. I think there's a whole provision in the Land Act in terms of how you acquire land for settlement of squatters. So again, that's going to be a whole conversation. So in my view, I think there's, in the one instance is the use of the land for other purposes, for other public purposes, a useful thing? The answer is yes. The second one is the process, was the process that was followed, the legal process. I think there's going to be challenge in terms of the legality of how that process went into, in terms of the taking away of the land.
And so the Law Society might really have a sway on this, looking at the legal perspective. And
I think if one of the issue goes to court, to be honest, there's going to be a huge legal challenge in terms of sustaining the process that's gone on, because while the purpose for which it was acquired was a legitimate purpose, I think the process by which it's banned might be a process that actually leads to challenge in courts.
Well, you raised the question of the presidency and the weight of the presidency, upon maybe a civil servant, the way also President Uhuru Kenyatta really reacted. For one assessment, that was a bit dehumanizing, even just to see the VC himself really in a whippy-tearing mode, speaking to the council and also, giving his last statement saying, this will be my last that you'll be seeing me at the end of the day. The president and the weight of that particular office bearing down on you as an individual, I think that can be very reductive. Do you think the president really acted in the wisest of manner in terms of just handling this, even saying, I'm going home in 3 months and you'll be going home with you?
I think Dibal, as I looked at this, because I remember looking at the hospital, the Kenyatta University Teaching and Referral Hospital, and the problems they had in 2015, 2016, 2017, moving forward. You remember for about 3 or 4 years.
Speak to what I'm asking.
That's what I'm saying. Yes. That's what I'm saying. What I'm coming to is a power play between the former VC and the current VC. It's really that simple. And
because the VC now is a chair.
Professor Mugenda and Professor Inaina. It's a power play between the two of them.
And so the president has got in between.
That if you start looking at the beef that they've had since Mugenda took over, or running on the hospital, and the resistance that was there to transfer the hospital to a separate board and a separate everything else. That power play has been there for the last 6-7 years. And now it has culminated now into the VC leaving.
Does Professor Mugenda feel entitled? Because I think also this particular project was her own creation, was her own idea, if I may understand that, from the readings that we've had previously. And it was actually, first out of the gate from other universities we were saying this was a phenomenal project. So maybe this was a pet project. That's why she was really clinging into, or clinging.
And that's where I'm coming from. Her vision when she was the VC at KU was really to make it a center of excellence for a lot of things. And when this happened, the hospital happened, and you remember even the loans that the Chinese had used to finance the hospital, it was unable to pay itself back to the government, so the government can also pay the Chinese, and that's part of the reason why she had come in and take over the running of the hospital. However, being a power play between the two, and the fact that, and the lawyers will probably tell us, in terms of when I was just thinking about the issue of the use of the land, the issue of eminent domain, because I think we have the eminent domain in this country, where the government can take land for use, for public use. When it's public to public, and I think the lawyers now with the lawsuit and everything else that could probably be easy to come up with. How is that process? How does that happen when you're taking a private public land for the use of public land, and the public officers are releasing the land for the public use? With the things that are coming in there, WHO, the research, the quotas and everything else, the 4 uses or 3 or 4 uses for the land, the issue is about the process. Because having a WHO hub in this country is of national interest to our country. The things that government want to do on that land is of national interest to this country and to this region. So the question is about how they went about getting the land. The use of the land itself is extremely important for this country and for this region. And therefore, if I was in Professor Wainaina's shoes and probably part of the board there, this is a fight that probably would not have fought. But let it go to because I know the Law Society probably going to file a lawsuit on this. The courts will determine whether the process was followed. But I think the use of the land for me is much more important because of the importance of what was coming on that piece of land for this country and for this region.
Billow Kerrow.
No, Deval, I think there are a number of issues on this matter. One is the term you used of entitlement. In this country, one of the challenges we have is people who think they're entitled to this country and that they run things the way they want. Professor who runs this hospital has been running this university. And it's like this university must be, about that professor. And so I think when you get into a situation where things are personalized, and public institutions have been personalized, and they have been made, that no one else can run them, no one else has a say on it, I think it's really very unfortunate. And I agree with what Prof said earlier, that, if for this professor, VC, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you went ahead and signed, tomorrow the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission would be on his neck. How did you, and so many people have been held, you've seen the many cases that have been in court, people who have given out, signed off to public land, and there's no excuse that will be acceptable in law when you're taken to court by Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. There was a letter from Kinyua, or there was a letter from, that's not going to work. There's a procedure, there's due process, and it must be followed. And one of the things we're being told is even the council has not sat to discuss or even approve that matter. So there's no way, and this is what the BC said, I have no powers to sign off. I have no powers to hand over, surrender the title. So I think it's a question of impunity, in my view, really. What the office of the president did is to try and force the public servants to hand over, a state land without going through due process. And I think that, unfortunately, this gentleman, in my view, is a hero in terms of integrity, because tomorrow you'll be charged for abuse of office if you did what he did. This is what all this case is about, abuse of it, the way you used your power in the office to sign off things without going through the law. And I think so, and when you're a stickler to the law and you avoid that, you're then, fired. Because, so the second thing I want to say is that only 10% of the land is going to WHO and those research things. The other 90% is not going there. It's gone to the referral hospital, it's gone to the quarters. So the 30 and 10 acres are the only ones that went to this. The government has land. This university, the professor said, we have need for our university. We have a master plan to develop it. We have other activities for it. We need it. And every public institutions, particularly universities, need land. See what's happened at Nairobi University, and the pressure it has of getting, land. So I think it's critical that, you look at the needs. And if WHO is an international organization, is a non-governmental organization, is not a state organ, it cannot be entitled to land. It can't. It can buy land. It has capacity. UN is rich. What's forcing you? They can buy land next to it. There's huge lands available next to Nairobi University. So I think the whole thing is the power play that my colleagues have mentioned. It's really, in my view, it's the office of the president is trying to score points on behalf of that professor. So it doesn't really, it's bad. It's a very bad thing in terms of integrity, in terms of the way public servants, they work Because when you are sticking to the rules, you're sticking to the due process, you're sticking to the law, you get vilified and you get hounded out of office. And if you did what they want, tomorrow you are in court for abuse of office and all manner of charges.
Surely, but I think it should have been also just modest of the government to really put also the University Council in the know regarding this particular conversation. So if you have Professor here saying they had no knowledge of the cabinet decision and the University Council was not even involved in this particular process in the first place, and we have this pronouncement coming from the president just from the left. We have Magoha also coming to the fore saying if it were him who was sitting as Vice Chancellor, he will have elected to, of course, cede the land, the decision of the land as it is. So is it just pandering to the executive because of his position as a cabinet secretary, that he can't speak against the presidency and what has been done? Or where should he really stand as a cabinet secretary? Him being also a vice chancellor of the University of Nairobi before.
He should have resigned. In developed countries, it's the minister who would have resigned. After that, humiliation to his officer. The first thing Professor Magoha should have done is to quit and say, look, I can't stand what you have done to my juniors. But what he did was to laugh off to what happened to his colleague, to his employee. He said, the guy can go to hell. Who is he? I mean, that's not the way to treat your public servants who work under you. So the professor, unfortunately, is a psychopath. What he did was very, very contemptible, frankly.
I know this is putting also Professor Odote in a very squeamish position.
Debal, but I will say two things. I think the two things that I'll say, Debal, number one, the reality is that we need to have a much more clearer process in terms of how we move public land from one public purpose to the other. That requires to be clarified. I think I wrote about that when we were discussing the issue about when we were building the expressway and we were excising some part of Uhuru Park until there was complaint about it. Because the law contemplates that you'll be moving from private to public or from public to private. I think because one of the critical conversations is this a public purpose, and you see both education and the hospitals are public purpose. So I think clarifying that is important. But the second, and that's something that I think everybody needs to concede, that we need a much more clearer process in terms of how do we move from one public purpose to the other, and what's the process of consultation. The second, based on that, Debal, the reality is that there was communication between the council and the cabinet. There was communication. I think yesterday the letters were flying out, so it cannot.
Because yes, this is what we were reading here.
Yeah,
there was communication. So someone is not really telling the truth.
Let's get to let's get to the root of the issue, and I think the root of the issue, number one, is what was the process of moving the land from one purpose to the other. The second is the power play that involves, I think, the two VCs. But in terms of communication, I think from the little that we see, the complaint cannot be that there was no communication. The communication existed between the two of them. And the danger, Debal, of then having things that should be dealt with between two public entities in a manner of decorum is that when it now comes to the public, we are put into a situation where we are discussing personalities as opposed to the issues, and that's the unfortunate part of this conversation. In this instance, I think just to be fair to C.S. Magoha, in this instance, if you watch, I think C.S. Magoha was caught in the crossfire. I don't think C.S. Magoha is the one who initiated any of the processes. So I don't, in my view, this is one of the instances where, except for the statement he made,
but
which
Billow Kerrow says here, I mean, in modern or advanced democracies, what would you do if one of your officers is humiliated like that, and you are the cabinet secretary? Will you side or pander to what the executive, or to either side of the divide, or what will you do?
Whose officer is whose officer is the chair of council? Whose officer is the VC? Is it the officer of the CS, or is it the officer of the council?
No, it's Minister of Education.
It's the Minister.
The Minister of Education does not appoint.
No, but is the ministry is overhauling.
It does not appoint.
It does not appoint.
But what was the row that we saw also with the Vice Chancellor of the University of Nairobi?
That's why he's commenting
when
on
he had
it.
Kiamba and Magoha intervening.
Yes, and even on that,
if you say he's not appointing,
if you check
why then was he having his clammy fingers in this appointment?
And I think that's actually been the huge point of conversations about the Universities Act. I think the clarity is that the appointing of the process of who you report to, and that's actually the point that Professor Wainaina was making. The person that he reports to, who is in charge of the governance of the university, is actually the university council.
Is the council.
Yeah, and also the issue of communication. Communication was there before. The president is not crazy. He doesn't wake up one day and decide just going to walk on that piece of land and demand it. He probably got involved in the conversation after there was a stalemate, and something needed to be done in order to advance the issues of the WHO and the things that they were trying to do with that piece of land. So the conversations were there, and like I say, because of the power play between the two VCs of the same institution, then the president had to intervene and intervene on behalf of the better good of the use of the land, and that is putting the WHO, the research facilities, and all that, which is good for this country. So the issue of process, I think, has been there. With all the communication that now they're talking about the pieces, the letters that are going in between the ministry, between OP and everybody else. When there's a stalemate, then somebody has to be the person who brokers, and I think the president had to intervene and for the public good, for the better good of this country.
So from your own assessment, was that the only avenue the president will have used? There are other mechanisms he will have used instead of a public humiliation.
That's what I'm saying is the process may not have been perfect, but at some point the president had to intervene and make sure that what is good for this country and for the better use of the land.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, first I think we have to be very clear that the minister, the CS, has powers. He's the one who appoints the VCs on recommendation of the council. I mean, the universities all over, all universities, and we've seen that. But I think the issue here is their institutions, their organs, and the council has come out very strongly and said the professor does not have power to sign or surrender that title. So as far as the professor is concerned, in fact, he is not wrong. If anything, the government ought to have communicated with and dealt with the council, because that is the institution that is mandated, the organ mandated with the power, with that responsibility. And they have said no, we have not been approached in the proper manner, and you've seen their letter. So I think there is no due process. That the issue is they should have been allowed to look at all options, and what government normally does if they want to take land is consider giving you an alternative land if they need that land particularly, or compensate you, or there are processes. But the way you come out and say those letters are all dated in 1 week. Everything happened in a few days.
In a few days.
Yeah, I mean,
So
you're saying do
yeah.
this, hand over. You don't, you're gone. Which country are we living in?
Prof, Doctor, if you say there was communication, but in 1 week, seriously, how would you deliberate on such a very weighty matter as land before even you constitute the University Council to sit and deliberate on this matter? We have this pronouncement really coming. Law Society of Kenya President Eric Theory says here that they are really concerned by this directive to KU coming 3 weeks to the general election at the very tail end of leadership of President Uhuru Kenyatta. It says, quote unquote, the country has a long history. The director may just pick up this. The country has a long history where public land has been excised for supposedly public purposes, but eventually that land has ended up in the hands of private individuals.
Debal, I hope you heard me when I said that the process leaves a lot to be desired. I hope you heard that statement.
Yes.
And I still stick by it, that there's a problem with the process. Huge problem, in fact. And if you look at that quotation, actually for me, I think the bigger problem is not the land moving from public purposes to private hands. That's not the bigger complaint in this issue. The bigger complaint is in terms of the manner in which it moved from one to the other. Because even when I think you can't then say that the education is less important than WHO. You can't then say that WHO is less important than education. You need to ask yourself in the circumstances which was the better one. And I think there's no clear, it isn't the one of saying, it's not like the one that President Eric is saying that's moving for public, but that's not the issue. The second debate is the point I was making in terms of the communication. Even Eric admits that the complaint is that this is 1 week. So it is not as if there was no communication. To say we don't know is different from saying there was insufficient time for us to be able to consider this. And I think that's a fair conversation. So for me, I'm just trying to be fair in terms of the information that I have. That looking at that information, there was communication. Communication,
but the time they were really pinched for time.
Exactly, the timing is insufficient, and maybe the opportunity to make a decision is insufficient. But at least there were some levels of communication. I think that's if you start from a point of these are the facts, then let's argue about the implications of the facts. I think for me, I have a problem with the process.
With the process. And if we have the problem with the process, it seems also then the court will make their pronouncement on this, and this particular handover may not really happen at the end of the day.
When the courts come in, that's a totally different issue. They'll be looking at the process. But for me, what I'm looking at is the best use of the land, and the best use of land when the WHO and all those are important things for this country. So the issue of process, and I think when the URI and the rest of the team LSK go to court, I think that will be discussed at that point.
So would we characterize this as an unfair summarily dismissal of Vice Chancellor?
Of course. Yeah,
It is unfair.
I mean, it's clear. The council, the institutions, the council's made it very clear in writing that the VC has no powers to surrender any title. So if you are victimizing a gentleman who has no mandate to do what is being asked to do, surrender, you can't. And the council has said we need our land and we're not ceding. So if you want to deal with the council. If you don't want to deal with the council, but you cannot do things in the manner in which you victimize a gentleman. Simply.
So is this the excesses of the presidency, right? He is actually overplaying his hands in terms of even interference with the process of the University Council. Because if the president is the one who made this pronouncement, we see now he's going home. Did he overplay his hand?
In my view, yes. Yeah,
so this is our excesses of the executive.
Exactly. In other countries, this will be abuse of office. You cannot simply do the kind of things you do in some other countries, even as president. There, you must follow the law. You must follow the process. I think that is the way things are done. It's not about the merits of whether WHO needs a place or not. That's not the issue. The issue is you are a nation. You have laws. You have rules. And you need to give respect to your own nation's values and laws, and you cannot overstep all that in the interest of setting up an institution. Yeah.
So you hold with that view as well, Professor Odote? This is an excesses of the executive really or power?
For me, I hold the view that the process was problematic. I think the process...
We agree the process was, but we're talking about the executive himself.
The reason why I want to just leave it at the process of problematic is because for me, looking at the movement from one public purpose to the other, I'm not even sure who is it who has the final responsibility in terms of making the determination of that movement between one public purpose to the other. If you have to debate between, I don't think that moving it to WHO is more important than moving it away from the university. I don't think so. Having said so, I think the discussions between the council and the cabinet required to have been had, so that people are able to ask themselves, in this circumstance where we have two competing public purposes, which one gives in to the other? Unfortunately, that discussion doesn't seem to have happened, and we put ourselves in this particular messy situation where now we are discussing about the conduct of the president vis-a-vis the conduct of the vice chancellor, and leaving ourselves away from the real issue about how do we move from one public purpose to the other.
But centering on maybe on the cost-benefit analysis, and where we have all these universities having assets, in land, having assets within other jurisdictions as well. Kenyatta University of Nairobi, they have huge tracts of land that are not being utilized. And we've had issues where, some of these universities we're talking about, they're cash strapped. How then do we, even with the council itself, and you have all this wide, we're talking about 1,000 acres of land that has not been utilized for the longest time. How then do we turn that to make it of beneficial material utility for the university itself to generate income? And even in this particular incidents that we have a big project that is incoming, and you have huge tract of lands. The process being followed or not, what is the wisest of fashion to use this, some of these assets?
There's a future generation. You don't look at today. This university, Nairobi University, had how many students 10, 20 years ago? And how many students does it have today? Look at the population of this country 10, 20 years ago. Look at the population today. What will it be in the next 20 years? And so land is not about today only. You're looking at the future generations. There will be, universities are coming up with new courses, new faculties. They are new. 20 years ago, there was no referral hospital at Kenyatta Hospital, at Kenyatta University. Today they have it. Tomorrow they might have some huge facility for IT or something. So that the land will be used. So that's why the university was very clear, and they said we have a master plan for our land. We don't have any idle land. We have activities planned for it. And so, but if you say we're going to do what they're doing, what happened to Kenya Railways? It had vast land and properties. All of it has disappeared. Paying salaries, paying what? Grabbed. The whole of Upper Hill was Nairobi Kenya Railways.
Yes.
Has it benefited? The railway is still in doldrums, but the land is gone. Look at Kenya, East African Portland Cement. It owned the entire Athi River. It is all, we've been told, we have to excise off it and we have to sell it. We've been selling, and has that company survived? It has sunk. It's dead. So it's not about, I don't think the issue, we have not been very successful on how you use properties of public. So when you start going into those, and universities have looked after their properties and they are looking at the future. In my view, really institutions like schools and universities need land always for expansion because students' population increase, and there are many other reasons why they need it.
But even this, learning is gravitating towards the digital. Maybe we'll argue that we don't really need the mortar and brick university. It's because now everyone is gravitating to e-learning and all. So when you talk about the future,
actually the future university will require no land.
They require no land. So when you talk about
if you go to the Western countries, and some of the major universities that are in urban areas like Georgetown and other universities, they have no land. They have buildings, and university does not mean land. It means you have space where you can be able to expand. And the future of universities, and that's why the issue, and I remember when I wanted to establish a university here in 2010 when I came back from the US, I'm being told to get 70 acres of land.
70 acres?
70 acres of land for you to get permission. 50. No, we had to negotiate for 3 years to bring it to 50.
So you have actually to begin with 70 acres of land.
Yeah, at that time. Then we negotiated down. They came to 50 acres of land. And that's why you see most of the universities in Nairobi are actually in Kajiado, because they go there, they buy a piece of land. They say now we have we have 50 acres or we have 70 acres, and then they come back to Nairobi and they set up their campuses in Nairobi. So universities is not about land. It's about where you do the learning, and the learning is done in structures. It's not in piece of land, unless an agriculture university for those things. Now, going back,
I think you raised also a very important. Do we need to relook in some of these policies that you need 70 acreage of land, you need 50 for you now to establish a university here? In terms of just creating that investor friendly.
Yes, we do. And let me go back to KU. Public versus public. When there's a spat between two publics, who is the final arbiter? And probably the presidency, probably for the best use of the land, comes in and being the arbiter, the final arbiter. If KU has 1,000 acres, I don't know how many acres they have, I think it's about 1,000 acres, wherever they are now. And these guys wanted, what, 200 acres?
400
or 400 acres. 410. There's another 580 acres or 90 acres they could have used for other things that they wanted to do for future expansion. And therefore the issue of we have to preserve this land for expansion in the next 10 to 15, 20 years. What are you going to use it for? You have these huge institutions that are coming into the country.
You have the master plan now. So
the master plan is fine. We had the master plan for this city that was drawn up in the 1940s. We still have not been able to reach there. So is the fit for purpose? When you have a master plan and you're not executing, the same thing that we had with the Kenyatta Referral Hospital, Kenyatta University Teaching and Referral Hospital, which was inoperative until 2018. They started going to default on the loans because they could not jumpstart running the university. So we have to look at what is good for the public use, and for me. for me, that's the most important thing. It's not having a piece of land just sitting there and it's not being utilized. It's getting that piece of land and looking at the best use for that piece of land and for the greater good of the country.
Just three very quick things.
Yeah,
The first
then we end up on it, yes.
The first one, I think the custodian of public land under the 2010 Constitution, the one who helps us to balance, is actually the National Land Commission. So that's why the balancing should happen. And that's what I was telling you. I think there's an issue about the process. The second is in terms of rethinking the quantity of land that that universities have in light of the new. I think the greater policy conversation that we need to have. It's not just about land. We need a greater policy conversation in terms of what's the future of education in light of the adoption of technology after the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we haven't had that. I think the problem of fixing the things in terms of when there's a crisis arises, it stops you from having that robust conversation. And there's a need for us to ask ourselves, what's the future? If that future requires that as part of accreditation, you don't need 50 acres, that's okay. But that should not be the reason to say, let's get rid of the land that the institutions have. I think the third, which is something you raised and we got lost in it, I think the issue about, currently all public universities, and the teaching one, have huge financial debts. I think it's the CS for Treasury who was raising about looking at revenue generation. I think it is not, for me, I think the one about saying giving out land is, you can give all of it in the next 2 years. It will not solve the larger financial issue. I think we need to discuss the issue about how do we fund university education into the future to enable them to be sustainable. And that's a huge conversation that requires policy debate and policy solutions.
One last point on this issue of, in the old constitution, the power to allocate land was with the president. It was abused. Entire public land disappeared. We made it a point this time in the 2010 Constitution to strip the president of that power. The president's office does not have power to allocate land. I think let us not say that, in final arbiter, the president can. No, it doesn't. The president has no powers to allocate land under the 2010 Constitution. And institutions must be respected. That's why they are there. That's why they are gazetted. That's why they have vice council. People have been appointed to run. And all of them have got their mandate in law. The council has a mandate in law. So I think the other things can be discussed, but I think we must be very clear that we do not start, misapplying the powers. Otherwise, we will end up going back to where we were before the 2010 Constitution.
Indeed. And we have also on social media, maybe Director will just pick up this Kai Geoffrey Kulabusia, who's saying, my senior professor is not reading Article 62, that is public land, is the land that belongs to the state. And the state is the government. Kindly read it, Father. Maybe we could flip over there and try and see Article 62.
You read it? Professor mentioned it earlier.
But he's the one who's saying that the land is not government's.
There's actually, this is property law 101, and I teach land law, so I know. Before the 2010 Constitution, actually that land was called government land on the basis that government owned it. Article 62, first of all, it's actually not even Article 62 you should read. You should start with Article 60 that says all land in Kenya belong to the people of Kenya, meaning that all land belongs to all of us. And the reason why that's important is that even in this debate about which public purpose, then it's not about that this land is for government, that this land is for KU. This land is for the entire people. So the people of Kenya must determine, in the scheme of things, what's the best use we'd like to put it. Article 62 then says that this is public land. And public land, interesting, before the 2010 Constitution, what was government land was land that the president would then be the one to allocate because he was the head of government. In the 2010 Constitution, public land has an interesting conversation. First, it is owned by the people of Kenya, and the people of Kenya owns public land through the national government or through the county government. Then it is managed by the National Land Commission. Therefore, meaning that the process of dealing with the public land under the 2010 Constitution is much more nuanced than, is that Geoffrey?
That's Geoffrey.
Much more nuanced than what Geoffrey is saying. So I would urge Geoffrey to read Article 60 and 62 in the Constitution much more elaborately, and I'm happy to have the conversation with him even after this offline.
And I think for that matter as well, maybe we are referring, or we have our mind really backed in the previous Constitution as far as land belonging to the government. And I think even when you talk to the common man, they will always say,
Yes, serikali.
Yes, serikali.
Yes, serikali.
So when we know that with the new constitution it is belonging to the people first, then for the public, that is just a public interest, as you put it.
We should tell everybody that the cheese moved in 2010.
Yeah, who moved our cheese at least? It's good to know. It's good to know. That has been clarified. And then we have also DJ Joachim 1935, that is their Twitter handle. He says, ask the panelists their opinion about changing the name of Egerton University. A white colonizer settler took Kenyan land freely, set a college for whites, eventually donated the land, and will keep his name as a university name.
So are they asking about the change of name, or are they asking the issue about land? That's what we're discussing, land. And
So, I think also this really comes to bear.
I think for me,
some of us, now that we're discussing the university here, it's a good question.
So the settlers donated the land, and therefore they named the university under themselves.
No. He's saying, the white colonizer settler took Kenyan land freely, set a college for whites. So it was primarily for whites. I never knew that. Eventually donated the land, and we keep his name as a university name, Egerton.
Dubal, it is
Or it is
It
inconsequential.
is close to 60 years after independence. If we wanted to change the name, we
Could have done that.
We changed Forest Road the other day to Wangari Maathai, but I think that will not address the fundamental issue about the land ownership. I think let's separate the change of name from the discussion
So we're
about
splitting
land.
hairs. But we can see all these statues are really coming down, even going back, hacking back
But I
to
think,
history.
but I
When you
think,
go to,
but I think
to
the
some
important
of the
thing that you
European
mentioned,
countries, yes.
and a friend of mine was talking about that yesterday. I think the issue about decolonizing our laws, decolonizing our processes is an important conversation that we need to have. I think to start asking ourselves, are there things that still retain colonial legacy that we need to address? And I think that's a fair conversation in very many spheres. And I think it's something that I think we should be able to ask ourselves as a country and deal with. In the 21st century, it is nice to have things that associate with Mwencha, associate with Billow, without personalizing. It's supposed to have things that still have colonial names.
Billow.
You know, yesterday when this issue came up, I've seen some very senior leaders in the country commenting on why public institutions should have names. In Africa, it happens. In the rest of, if you look at Europe and US, you do not have public institutions named after presidents or after people who have been leaders. You cannot see that very common. You've been a prime minister, Margaret Thatcher. So you have got universities, public universities, or public hospitals, or public institutions, or public roads. But here, it's a common thing in our region. That this is a Moi Hospital, this is Kenyatta University, this is Kenyatta Hospital. Everything is after presidents and after leaders who are there. So I think if you allow even that one, there is no big deal about Egerton, because I mean you are. And so really, so you cannot make a fuss about why should somebody's name be there when. Today we are named the same. We are doing the same thing. He was the leader at that time of the whites, whatever who was the people in power at that time, and so we are doing the same thing. Going forward.
Maybe the nuance is the memory that is pegged behind the name. When we have Egerton, we have all these memories that conjure up about colonization and ostracization of the Africans here, and that was pure racism that maybe they're bringing to bear as well. These are sentiments that are very germane to the question that is being asked.
They are germane, and this is a conversation. If you go to the US, for example, the issue of Confederate flags and all those things, which is they are very emotive, and they go through a very dark history of the US. So at some point, probably we can do that. By the way, George Washington University in the US, one of the premier universities, named after President George Washington. So they do name after people, but after they are dead, when they are alive. But for me, I don't see a problem with the names, unless Egerton herself was such a bad settler and colonizer and abuser of human rights and all that stuff. Those are emotive issues that possibly will have its day and time. But I think right now we have more pressing issues to deal with.